Something exciting just arrived in the mail. I've been waiting to get my hands on one of these for years at this point. A Panasonic Do-Re-Mi from 1977. It's a little synthesizer with a record player built in. Basically, there was a brief moment in the 70s when Panasonic made a whole bunch of different little synthesizers for kids. In fact, I recently made a short video about this thing, which we're also going to be featuring in this video. I don't know why, but I find myself inexplicably charmed by these machines. It could be the beautiful space-age design, but it could also be because my first ever tape recorder as a child was by Panasonic. For some reason, they made a lot of red devices back then. Anyway, in this video, we're going to dive into this particular chapter in Panasonic's history, starting with the machine that just arrived in the mail, the Do-Re-Mi. I bought it as is, so it's anybody's guess whether or not it works. I guess this must be the battery compartment. Oh, it has a power cord too. I'm going to flip it back over. Oh no, the turntable fell out. Hopefully we can just pop that back in. Let's plug it in. Moment of truth. Ooh, not great. Oh man, it's getting quieter. And now it's not making any sound at all. It was working for a second. I mean, sort of. Okay, let's open this thing up and see if we can figure out what's wrong. So here's the circuit board. At its heart, it has this little amplifier chip, and then it has 3 transistors over here, and the rest is just resistors and capacitors. These things here are electrolytic capacitors, and they're the thing that most often goes bad in old circuits. So while I don't really understand how this circuit works, I do know that sometimes if you replace the capacitors, things get fixed. So that's what I'm going to do. Luckily, I have this kit full of different value capacitors, and I'm just going to replace them one by one. By the way, the purpose of capacitors is to store electricity for short periods of time, and what that means is that if you touch them, you can actually get a shock. In other words, one should be very careful when handling capacitors and always make sure that they've been properly discharged. All told, I replaced 13 capacitors, which took me about an hour. Not too bad. Oh wow, we're getting sound. Yeah, those scratchy buttons are going to be a problem. Before we try to fix those, I'm going to install an output jack. I've decided I'm going to put it here. I'm just going to use this manual drill. Now that I've got the right hole, all I need to do is solder some wires to the connector. I use this ohm meter to figure out exactly how the connector works. Basically, it just hooks into the speaker, and if headphones are plugged in, it bypasses the speaker and sends the output to the headphone jack. My final task is to fix those scratchy keys. This is pretty easy. I'm going to spray contact cleaner on this metal strip, and I'm going to clean the underside of the circuit board with a dry sponge. You see these pads here? That's the place where the keys make contact with the circuit board, so we want to give that a good clean. That should be all that's needed. Let's give this thing a spin. Not bad. Oh, that's way better. That actually sounds pretty cool. Let's try out that headphone jack now. Nice. Okay, so I'm definitely going to sample this. Of course, the fact that we have a headphone jack also means we can plug it into effects. Time to get out my trusty microcosm. Nice. This waveform is really gentle, has sort of a triangular shape, which lends itself particularly well to this kind of processing. It can be pitch bent up or down or chopped up, and it almost never sounds harsh. Some of the keys are a bit out of tune, which kind of adds to the charm. Oh, that's cool. Okay, let's keep exploring. Let's take a look at that other synth. As you can see, it's a pretty similar concept, whereas the one we've been looking at has a little turntable built into it. This one has an AM radio. The idea is you'll find yourself some nice music on the radio, and then you'll use the keyboard to play along with it. Of course, nowadays, the AM band is almost entirely talk radio, most of which does not really benefit from musical accompaniment.
South Carolina adopted a law banning cell phones in schools starting this.
While I've got this out, let's try to compare it with the Do-Re-Mi. Wow, they're really not in tune with each other. Kind of a cool chorus effect. Of course, because they're not in tune with each other, if I try to play them together, it sounds a little bit odd. Here's what it sounds like when I fix the pitches in the computer. Quite a serviceable analog synth sound. Speaking of which, one of the reasons why a device like this doesn't generally get classified as an analog synthesizer is because there's no filter or envelope for changing the way the instrument sounds. That being said, the analog oscillators used in such devices aren't fundamentally different than those found in analog synths. As I've been working on this video, I did some quick research about Panasonic. Here's what I was able to turn up. It was founded in 1918, and it was originally called Matsushita, which was the family name of the guy who started it. Within about 10 years, the company started selling things under the brand name National. And in fact, if you look at the Japanese version of these synthesizers, you'll notice that they all say National. It was only in the US that, for trademark reasons, the name Panasonic was used instead.
Panasonic, just slightly ahead of our time.
Of course, the vast majority of what Panasonic sold was consumer electronics.
Panasonic makes a lot of radios in crazy shapes and colors.
Also TVs, turntables. As I was searching for information about the company's history, I stumbled on this listing, which contains a model number for an organ released in 1963. This was a collaboration between National and Acetone, which would eventually become Roland. In the late 60s and early 70s, the company would produce a few organs, although the only one I can find any information on is this stylish keyboard. And then, of course, in 1975, they produced this thing, which we've been looking at as part of this video, followed by the Do-Re-Mi series in 1977. By the way, this is one of the original magazine ads for the Do-Re-Mi. I think these kids are supposed to be dressed up like classical composers. Slightly terrifying. After this, in 1980, the company got into musical instruments in a much bigger way. They went on to produce a whole range of organs and digital pianos, all marketed under the brand name Technics. They even released a real analog synthesizer with a filter and an envelope and everything you'd expect. Pretty cool. Okay, let's get back to our guests of honor. So one thing I haven't done yet is try out the record player. I was able to order the exact Panasonic needle I need for this machine, and it just arrived. Installing is super simple. Basically just screw it in. Okay, let's give it a spin. Oh, this is awful. It's super slow and not even a constant speed. I'm gonna listen through to the whole song, see if it gets any better. After messing around with it for a bit, I've discovered that it actually spins too slow at the start of the record and then speeds up. It's kind of hard to play along to a song that keeps changing key.
When I get to heaven, tie me to a tree.
Maybe let's turn our attention to the other Panasonic synth. So as it happens, I actually have two of this synth. Let's get the second one out. The reason I wanted to mess around with two at the same time is I actually wanted to do an experiment. If you'll recall, these both have radios.
To the mid-Atlantic.
11 prisoners have been transferred from.
As it happens, I have a little AM radio transmitter. I want to try to transmit from one of these to the AM radio on the other.
Black Information Network.
Okay, so I'm holding a note down on the left side.
610.
I'm going to change the tuning.
On your home.
Let's see if I can pick up my pirate radio station. that was really easy. Let's try both keyboards at the same time. That's pretty harsh sounding. I'm going to try to move the transmitter further away. This is the future of lo-fi. If you thought old cassette tapes sounded too good, it's time to embrace the magic of AM radio. Coming back to the Do-Re-Mi, I think one of the reasons these Panasonic instruments have so much appeal is because their design choices are common to a certain class of devices we see today. Specifically, lifestyle synthesizers. You've probably seen these. They feature bright, primary colors with simple, unthreatening user interfaces. An aesthetic which tells the user that this isn't just meant to live in your studio, but maybe also your living room. To give you a sense of just how current this aesthetic is, a while back I did a video about the Casio PT-10, a white keyboard with primary colors from 1987, and in the comments, several people confessed that based on the thumbnail, they had just assumed it was a new device. And I get it. Anyway, I'm glad that this particular unit has been restored to a functional state. I'm also happy that I got to sample it, thereby preserving its sound for future generations. It has a pleasant, retro timbre that should work well in a variety of different kinds of music. Of course, the actual Do-Re-Mi is monophonic, but the sample library is polyphonic, and it's nice to be able to hear what these waveforms sound like when playing chords. The sample library is completely free. There's a link in the description to this video. Speaking of which, if you enjoyed this video, a great way to support what I do is by joining the Patreon. It's just $5, and every month I release a brand new sample library just for patrons. Okay, I think that's it. See you soon.